All right. Good morning or good afternoon or maybe good evening. I don't know where you're joining us from in the world. Welcome to Crazy Talk. If this is your first time tuning in, Crazy Talk is a Facebook Live TV show where I interview all sorts of people about all sorts of things that are either directly or tangentially related to mental health. It's my show. I get to do what I want. I'm your host, Lee Thomas. If this is not your first time watching Crazy Talk, if you are a returning viewer, thank you so much for coming back. Really glad we haven't scared you off yet. And I think you're really going to like this episode. So I'm glad that you're here. So before we get started, I want to give a couple shout outs. I want to give a shout out to Peer Support Canada. Peer Support Canada had an amazing conference last week. It was so good. I also want to give a shout out to the Canadian Association of Public Schools International, who also had a conference, bizarrely the same weekend as Peer Support Canada. I had the great privilege and the great amount of luck to be able to attend both. So thank you so much to both conferences for having me, and keep up the amazing work. So those shout outs out of the way, although well deserved, but also now out of the way. So I'm super excited to introduce our next guest. So our guest this week is Shawn Dorey. I'm really lucky because Shawn, I know you in real life, which is which is pretty cool. Like, we haven't seen each other in physical person for a while, but yeah, it's been a while. So Shawn is an expert in all sorts of things related to things like gaming and culture. And we're going to kind of talk about that, mental health, and maybe LGBTQ stuff. Like, I don't know. We're just going to see where this conversation goes. So Shawn, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
No problem. Thank you so much for having me. The schedule fairies came together and we're like, yes, this can work.
Yay, it all works out. And I love it when the schedule fairies come together. So Shawn, you were talking in your bio, which people can read. I don't know where it is in relation to the video. I think it's above us, below us. Wherever it is on Facebook, people can read your bio, but you have a lot of knowledge about kind of like gaming and media and culture and how those all kind of tie together. So how does, I guess, mental health play a role in that? Because like, why are you here? I guess, like, I'm so glad that you are, but like, you were the one who said, like, you know what, I'd love to be on Crazy Talk sometime. And I was like, oh my goodness, love to have you, because I know that you're brilliant. But why that mental health component?
So I guess everything I do has always been an attraction to people and interacting with people. And mental health is obviously an important aspect to consider in our interactions with other people. It's something that's often, as the cliches go, or cliches, but also non-cliches, you know what I mean, of how we don't talk about it. And I just think it's really important to, because from personal experience, people often have in the past confided with me. In fact, like right now, in the process of one of my close friends, helping them build up the courage to do stuff like go to the hospital and like talk to important people to actually get the diagnosis and medicine she needs. So like, and then growing up with my mom, she'd been hospitalized before for mental health stuff. So it's just like, even since I've been 8-year-old, I've been like, it's been something that's important to me and to be cognitive of, and just like have these discourses, have these conversations so that people can treat it better, like that. The same way we treat going to the doctor. I say as someone who never goes to the physician. So yeah, no, like that's kind of why I came on the show. And then like, I love your work a lot. I've like seen you do all these super great things since we graduated. And while I was like digging into literature and narrative analysis and stuff, it's always been in the context of finding how media relates to people. And I think mental health, like we treat as this like enigma, and this like, we only ever look at it from the negative side too. Mm-hmm. But like mental health is also when we're happy. And like, so to me, mental health and that kind of stuff, everything kind of just links together in this kind of mesh, in this spectrum of good and bad. And I just think we should find more interesting ways to make those links, instead of every time we do a show like that's about mental health, it's always about the bad times. But like, what if we looked at mental health, looked at and had that conversation through the good times, and how does that lens change things?
Yeah. And I think
Yeah.
that's a really good question in terms of like how does that lens change things? Because I know there's this and I don't think it's a bad narrative. I don't want anyone getting the idea that I think this is a bad narrative, but I think there is this narrative going around of kind of, let's talk about how people with mental illness are sick. Like they're not bad people, they're sick. And or they're not lazy, crazy, and stupid, they're sick. And I get that. And I think that that's far more accurate than the idea that people with mental health issues are like bad people in any way. But I know for me, like, and I grew up in like small town northern Alberta, very if your bone is broken you get a cast, and other than that you suck it up. And so the idea of being sick was a scary one to me. You know what I mean? Like the idea of mental health being an illness, I was like, oh, I don't want to be like a person with an illness. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I definitely get the like, but also like illnesses like this. We think of illnesses as these things that we can cure. It goes away. So while like it's definitely super useful to like, I feel like take that first step out of like it just being these people are neurodivergent and thus bad. I feel like illness is like the first step to being more like mental health is like a condition that we're in. It's going to be constantly changing, and our relations to everything in our environment is going to change that. And it's just something we need to monitor the same way. And like, so like going to gender, a lot of my thoughts on gender and mental health, I find go parallel in interesting ways. So like, I'm very, in the same way that like mental health I see as fluid, I also see like gender as this fluid thing that changed over time. So like when I talk about myself in the past, even though like I now identify as non-binary and agender and stuff like that, I also see that past me because I was presenting and at the time truly thought I was a cis dude until I came out at 24. Maybe 23, and takes a while once you kind of figure that stuff out. But like just because I am this now, who knows what I could be in the future? And because it's that journey of change. And I just think like, so like, for example, you could have like experiences with depression, and like sure, some people can quote unquote actually get over depression because it's episodic sometimes, or it's onset due to like stuff like seasonal affective disorder, etc. But then like there's also people who like my mom who are just always depressed, and like that's their state of being, but she can be happy while being depressed, and that's like it's so much more complicated than that. And it's just like I feel like oftentimes it's kind of like when I go with my obsession with technology and symbols and symbology. So like at this point, for example, sending an email, I always love this comparison. So you can CC someone or carbon copy it, but that's not actually what you're doing digitally. It's very different, but it's just like, it's this ineffective metaphor that still creates this form of meaning. And kind of for me, like that's kind of what I see as the sickness kind of narrative around quote unquote dealing with mental health. It's this like ineffective metaphor that gets at the crux of it, but still has something missing, I guess.
Yeah, like it does feel that it's like it's right but not complete. Like it can be both of those things, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think like both, whether you're talking like gender or mental health or whatever it might be, I think a lot of like what I'm hearing is this idea that one narrative doesn't fit everyone, right? Like,
exactly.
And we see that like in in the LGBTQ community, the idea, with gender stuff, that if you were, and I think maybe I don't want to speak for you, but I think maybe non-binary people hear this a lot as well, the idea that if you were truly transgender, you would have come out of the womb like knowing, what I mean? Like you are born understanding that this is the gender that you are, and blah, 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 blah. Or, I mean, we even see that with like, with sexuality stuff as well, right? Where it's like the idea that if you weren't, a certain way at a certain age, then it's all just something you've acquired.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, even if there isn't that biological aspect to it, because I think that biological argument can cut in a lot of different ways, but even if something is social, like even if the reason that I'm non-binary is because I heard the word non-binary and went, hey, that fits me. And if I had never heard that word, I might have just, lived uncomfortably as someone who thought they were a cisgender woman for a long time. Like, even if it was a social thing, that doesn't make it less real, right? Because society is a real thing.
And also, you usually use the term social construct, and like just because it's a social construct, like it is still constructed by society, and like oftentimes people use that to mean something isn't real, but no, that's not the purpose of like a social construct analysis. The purpose is to acknowledge the fact that this monolithic entity that exists in our world, it does exist, was created due to the friction of people interacting and coming together and joining together to create meaning through language and culture and technology and everything like that. So when you have these social constructs, they end up being these things that we just need to be cognitive that they weren't something that's a seed miraculously fell into the ground and planted. It was created with thoughts in mind. It may have happened accidentally, but it was still created with intentions, with understanding of trying to organize this world. And like how, while the Earth will rotate around the sun, and it will spin and rotate, and time will change, and or rather, the sky will change. Time itself was this construct we created to measure it. Time itself isn't really real in the sense of a natural occurring thing.
Yeah, it's kind of like the idea when you, like, whether it's the word non-binary or any other kind of LGBTQ word, when people are like, well, that word's just made up. And it's like, oh boy, do I have news for you about all the other words. Like,
yeah, no, I only take fresh organic words grown on Northumberland farms.
Yeah, the word trees. But I mean, and that idea of social constructs, I did like a TED talk about they pronouns about a month ago. Time is a funny thing, so I could have been longer. Maybe 2 months ago. Anyway, and one of the things that I said is this idea that, like, is gender a social construct? Like, absolutely. But it also plays a very real role in our world in the same way that, money is a social construct. But like, I still have to pay rent. I can't just go to my landlord and write on that check, money is a social construct. What do you do with? Right? Like, I still need to pay rent, as real world implications and really significantly impacts the way that we live our lives. And so the fact that it's socially constructed doesn't mean that it's not a real thing that impacts real people, I guess.
No, exactly. And money impacts real people too. That's why I don't have my master's degree hanging on the wall, because I never paid my last semester of tuition yet. Yay, capitalism. Anyway.
Oh, it's fun. Sorry, you go.
I guess, like, personally, I'm currently like in the middle of like navigating the constructs of actually having health insurance that's valuable and useful for the first time ever for my employment. Like, I'm working at a call center right now, and it's okay. It's still pretty like low in pay and stuff, but they do a better job than I was expecting going into this employment contract. So currently I'm like figuring out like what are the therapists in Halifax and stuff, because I often in like my personal life do a lot of like, should go see mental health. Everyone should go see mental health practitioners, because just like going to the doctor, blah blah blah. But then I never fall through it myself. And the big turning point for that for me was the end of grad school, because I dropped down into this like mire of executive dysfunction and just not knowing what I was doing with my life now that I was like done school. I didn't want to do a PhD anymore because my identity had been wrapped up in that so much, and I realized like when I don't have like a very clear, like other person defined goal. I don't really know how to walk forward on my own sometimes. And like, I can talk about that with like friends and family and everything, and that's super important, and we should. But still, at the end of the day, there are people who have paid many $1,000s to get these fancy pieces of paper that might have a bit more insight because they've read some clinical studies or done some themselves.
Yeah, it's this weird situation, and I find that people who live at a variety of who kind of embody some intersections in the world sometimes have additional struggles when it comes to accessing care that is relevant. I guess it maybe is the right word, because like I know in my experience I'm very, very lucky that I have now, after many years, found a counselor who like is just like with it when it comes to trans issues, and like maybe probably even more knowledgeable about it than me, which is so nice, because for so long I was seeing mental health practitioners who I knew more about LGBTQ stuff than they did. And then I was seeing like LGBTQ practitioners who didn't want to touch the mental health piece. And it was so hard to find someone who wanted to do both, or who was able and competent to do both, because sometimes like that piece of paper that says, I know a lot about mental health isn't really talking about everyone's mental health.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's true with everything. Like, I have a piece of paper that says I'm a master's in English language literature and stuff, but I couldn't tell you the first thing about like 16th century literature or anything like that, or like the narrative structures of postmodern sci-fi in America. But I could tell you a lot about romantic poetry, because I got obsessed with Lord Byron, my probably non-binary hero of the 1800s, and also 18th century, not 1800s. There's a difference. Anyway, like video games and stuff, because like that's like how I got. Well, my academic journey was real weird, because I don't know if I said it in the description down there, but like I mentioned this earlier, like guidance from other people. When I first started university, it was because I was in a high school computer science class, and I was one of the good students. So that means the teachers showed more investment in my future after I was done. And my comp sci teacher, he was like, "What are you doing for university?" And I gave him a shrug, and he said, "That's not good enough. You should be going." And then the next day he literally came in with like this half filled in UNB comp sci application and was like, "Finish the job." So I filled it out and then mailed it in with like 90 stamps, because I had a week before the applications were due, and I didn't know how to make it go faster, because I never mailed things, because I was 18 in 2009, and it was just not how we communicate. Anyway, so I got in and I got accepted and everything. I did a year of computer science, did okay. Then ended up flunking out of CS into business. Hated my life for 2.5 years, because even though I was good at what I was doing, unless you count stats suck. I just really didn't like it. But then like that's when I finally found this program, which was called Media Arts and Cultures, and I had this course that it was the hardest earned B of my life. I got a B in this course, but I just felt so proud of it. It was called Game Design 1. It was taught by this professor, Jeff Mundy, and I think he still teaches there now, and he's like a veteran of the game industry, and he was just like super real and stuff. I was like, you know what? Maybe I can graduate with this business degree and a minor in this stuff to keep me interested in my life and school and everything. So I went to the academic advisor for Media Arts and Cultures, and I had a 1.9 at the time. I walked into this meeting, and he told me at the start of the meeting that he knew I was going to do an honors in his program. And I looked at him, and I mentioned my GPA, and he said he literally just repeated himself. And then here we are now. I did an honors in his program, and the reason I went to grad school was because my honors advisor, she looked at me in our first meeting and asked me what grad schools I was going to. And that's how I ended up getting to Waterloo and everything. And then now I am like trying to do something with writing and poetry because I dug really deep into poetry during grad school. And like, it's something that comes easy and feels right when I do it. And I just want to share it with people because I want people to feel like the same way when I like listen to a real good piece of spoken word or reread one of Keats or Byron's or Shelley's poems.
Yeah, so I'm thinking like there's a lot of stuff I want to dig into here. But I'm thinking like, so from both, like I'm thinking gaming and I'm thinking poetry and mental health, and all of those often seem like things that are inaccessible to people. Like those often seem like conversations where if you did not get in on the ground floor, you know, back in the day, you don't have a chance of catching up to the conversation now. Did you ever find that that whole like, how do I access this thing that might feel inaccessible to people? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I face imposter syndrome a lot of times in everything I do. And I don't think I really have like it's I've always find I move along the best when I find other people who can help like hold my hand the way in because I flirted with poetry my entire life, but I never really committed from like high school through undergrad because I hadn't found like the right person to tell me I could do it is almost the best way to say it. But then I made this really important friend in grad school, and we were having conversations of poetry and like what we liked about it, what we hated about it, and like what she had said to me at the time was something about like how poetry isn't just supposed to be read; it's supposed to be heard, and like I always think it's like the little things for me personally that like just kind of opens doors. It's just like these brief moments of inspiration. But in general, I think it like if we're gonna talk about gaming, like I think like everyone plays games. Everyone, they never stop. Like between phones and like every aspect of our life almost becomes more and more gamified every day because like even like stuff like social media has like all these like leaderboards and achievements about you've made all these posts today. For a while, like Facebook was doing this thing where it would send a notification being like, suddenly 2 people interacted with your stuff this week, which was really weird. And they stopped, and I'm glad because that was a monitoring I did not need, especially not like publicly. I did not need to know that. But like it's often I find things become inaccessible because of the way people gatekeep their clubhouses. I have a friend, she just finished writing her PhD thesis, and it's all about looking at like the gaming community and the way like cisgendered white males guard this cultural clubhouse, and like she called it like reclaiming the cultural clubhouse, like the inaccessibility of the games community to or something like that. But all that's to say, like I think things are accessible as long as we always like one of the biggest grounding techniques I found in like taking any challenge is to always just try to break it down into the smaller lists. Because like, for example, I'm going to make a mess now, but I have a deck of cards here. Oh no, I just dropped 52 cards. I have to pick up 52 cards, or I have to pick up 1 card and then 1 card. And like those kind of techniques, and like that technique has been so valuable to me in making like anything accessible. But and it's like simple, but I think like if we take things like one at a time, that really helps it become accessible no matter what. But the most important thing ultimately is to have people to hold our hands along the way.
Yeah, so there's a saying that we often say when we talk about kind of systemic social change, and it's the whole, how do you eat an elephant? 1 bite at a time.
Another one I love, this like same saying is just this like Tumblr post that goes around all the time, and it's like we always worry about traveling in the past and making a small change will affect the future, but we never think about how we can do that in the present.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I remember reading that somewhere and being like,
Yeah.
oh man, yeah.
Yeah.
So I love that. And I can't believe we're already I know we are in the same time zone, which is really, really nice. I'm very rarely in the same time zone with my guests. But we're getting close to the end of our time, which is wild because this has been such a good conversation and so many other threads that I want to follow. But I just really want to thank you for like taking the time to be on the show. This has been a really interesting conversation for me. And I always love bringing on guests who like know way more about a topic than I do, so I can ask questions and like get a little bit smarter. And so for the people who are watching, what would you kind of like them to do next? Is there a way that they can reach out to you or a way that they can learn more about any of the topics that you've talked about?
I guess I'm gonna I guess name drop like one of my social media feeds. It's just super easy. Because in grad school I decided to try to make some of my stuff just my name. So you can find me on Twitter at Shawn Dorey. And anything I do usually ends up on Twitter eventually. And the best part is you can find the pinned tweet to my most proud Medium piece of writing where I hadn't talked about this yet, and I'll open this can of worms, but a photo of mine went viral on 4chan. So that Medium piece talks about the emotional negotiations that I went through just kind of coming to terms with people from 4chan looking me up on Facebook. That was the time. I don't want to dig into that too much. And I used to work with First Person Scholar, which is this middle state publishing journal website, and it's like www.firstpersonscholar.com, and they do games criticism in a way to try to make like academic work more accessible to the masses. And I love that community of writers and editors and everything, and everything you see on there is like, I think it's a great way to look at like the games industry in a new light. Is like a good first step for some people who might be like wanting to take that like next step into, because I'm a strong believer that we're all gamers, we all have a cell phone, it's 2018. And like it's just like interaction is such an integral part to our lives, and that's like one of the big reasons I went to grad school to study that kind of stuff. And now I'm trying to do like stuff like interactive film. It's that script I'm working on right now. But no, yeah, I guess check me out on Twitter and check out First Person Scholar.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will put, if it's okay with you, I'm going to put a link to your Twitter and a link to that Medium piece in the comments below once we wrap up the show.
Yeah.
So Shawn, thank you so much for being on the show. It was really great having you. Everyone who's watching and listening, thank you so much for watching and listening and tuning in today. It was really great having you. I want to give a special notice to Monisha Bakshi, who gave us a little shout out about the schedule fairies, which is really cute. So thank you so much for tuning in. And so if you are watching this episode and you're thinking like, wow, Crazy Talk is so much fun, I want to get episodes of Crazy Talk directly to my inbox every single week, then you can absolutely do that by signing up for my mailing list, which you can find at leethomas.ca, or I will also put a link to it in the comments below. So check out these comments in like 10 minutes because I'm going to be putting all sorts of links in there. So thank you all so much for tuning in. Be sure to tune in next week because we do Crazy Talk every single Saturday at 12:30 Atlantic, and I will see you there. Bye, guys.